Look at the number of people that click on the ads versus the number of people that click on the search results. I think you'd actually be astonished. At how many people actually click on the ad. One person may find it terribly upsetting that all these companies are collecting data on them. Their neighbor may find it actually quite helpful because as a result of collecting all that data, they get much more relevant advertising and other products.
We're so good at predicting what they want. Why are we waiting for them to order it? Let's just ship it.
The following program has been pre-recorded. As a non-commercial educational radio station, KZSC supports the free expression of ideas. Please be aware that the opinions expressed are those of the speakers or artists only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the UC Regents, KZSC staff, management, or underwriters. We welcome your feedback on our programming. Please direct your comments to the Program Review Committee at 831-459-4726 or by email at prc@kzsc.org. The Santa Cruz chapter of the ACLU is presenting a Zoom webinar on alternative responses to 911 calls. That's happening on Thursday, December 17th, 2020, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Law enforcement leaders and activists agree that many nonviolent calls should be responded to by mental health and social worker professionals instead of law enforcement officers. Panelists for this ACLU Zoom webinar will include Stephanie French, Operations Division Manager of the Santa Cruz Regional 911 System, Sarah Leonard, Executive Director of the Mental Health Client Action Network, Ashley Tran, Suicide Crisis Line Coordinator for Suicide Prevention Service of the Central Coast, and Ben Adam Clymer, formerly of Cahoots, Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets in Eugene, Oregon. For more information, go to the Facebook page for ACLU Santa Cruz chapter. Music is great, but aren't you tired of bobbing your head to the same 4/4 time signature? Get your body moving to a different beat during Fibonacci Hour on KZSC, where DJ Midas will lay down songs from a different wavelength. Thursdays from 2 to 4 p.m. on the Great 88.1 FM. You're listening to KZSC Santa Cruz, 88.1 FM, kzsc.org, broadcasting from the University of California at Santa Cruz. My name is John Malkin, and the name of this program is Transformation Highway. The band and culture jamming project Negativland recently released their 14th studio album titled The World Will Decide. Today you'll hear Jon Leidecker describe the latest offering from this Bay Area media collective founded in 1980.
Yeah, click. I'm recording.
Thanks for making time to talk with me, John.
Sure. No, thank you for even asking.
The new album, The World Will Decide, I listened to it with headphones on, and it is, as usual, mind-blowing and quite an interesting journey. and really musical. And I love some of the pieces that have drums and really good guitar work, melodic work, and this montage of voices and ideas that are exploring all kinds of things about technology and data and police and human empathy and emotions, and even these ideas around, do we have to die? Can human beings live forever? Um, the album opens with Unlawful Assembly, and we're in this time of the pandemic now. And I was thinking about how, I think The World Will Decide was created pre-pandemic, and I was considering how we're in a time now where it's probably the end of a period where the movies and albums and books that were made before the pandemic are coming out, and pretty soon everything will be affected by the pandemic, more directly in terms of art. Tell me about the opening song, though, because we are in this time of the pandemic where there has also been simultaneously huge outpouring of social change movements, the movement for Black Lives and movement to defund or abolish police. And this album opens with the voices of people at a protest and the voices of police saying, this is an unlawful assembly, and you hear people saying they're shooting rubber bullets into people's houses. What's on your mind in terms of what's going on with the pandemic and the social change movements happening now?
Well, that opening track is basically a studio version of something that we've been playing in concert since about 2015. And a lot of the voices that you hear in that opening track are mostly taken from YouTube and personal recordings from protests, Occupy-related protests from 2011. But also primarily the 2014 Ferguson protests and the military response, or the police response, the militarized police response, as well as some seeded recordings of the Umbrella Revolution from Hong Kong, just to sort of make underline that this is a global phenomenon. And the way we opened our concerts is we'd be playing these iPhone recordings of the LRAD sonic weapon that was being used domestically to disperse protests. And the LRAD is a physically dangerous, incredibly painful sonic weapon that you almost don't have a conscious response. You hear it and you begin to run. And it was, we compressed it so that it wasn't as sonically dangerous, but certainly, it just seemed to be an important thing to track the level of civil unrest that was happening circa 2015, 2016. And then the other thing going on in that opening track is that increasingly, all of these protests are captured and uploaded to YouTube, if not streamed online immediately. So a lot of people are just watching these protests from the safety of their own homes. So that was the context. And the record was done in December 2019. And then all of a sudden, the comments being made by people watching these protests from home and saying things like, I can't even leave my home in VR. That just sort of accidentally took on a completely different context. So in some ways we sort of lucked out there. What's amazing is how many people actually did feel compelled to go to the BLM protests in late June and July. I certainly went to a number of them myself in San Francisco. They were outdoors, and everyone was masked, and I didn't really know anybody who got sick from those. It really is remarkable what a difference just simply wearing a mask makes. Um, but yeah, I can't really say that we knew what we were doing. That just had to be the first track on the record, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's a little shocking to hear it as the album starts, and I appreciate it a lot.
Well, there's one sample that was particularly important, and that was uploaded to Twitter by Twitter user Brown Blaze. And she's the woman who's screaming, "Where are the cameras now besides ours?" And during the first two nights of Ferguson was being covered largely on Twitter, and it was all of the attention being paid. There was a total, there were no mass media headlines, and Facebook wasn't really, their algorithms were not escalating the activity in Ferguson. So you really had to be paying attention on Twitter. And I just really heard, I think almost everybody in this country understands the frustration at how slowly their version of a narrative gets out. Doesn't matter what side you're on, although I definitely throw down with her comment really resonated when she says, "Where are the cameras now besides ours?" We knew that comment really needed to lead the album.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's very important. And you mentioned just a few minutes ago the Occupy movement, which I'm glad you refer back to and feel connected to. It's not been mentioned very often these last 9 months or so. I have found.
They, it was really strange how many people by 2014, 2015 started referring to it as a failure. When in fact, yeah, I find it sort of laid the entire groundwork. 2011 was an important year. There was the resistance against what Scott Walker was doing in Wisconsin seemed to lead almost directly to the mass movement in Occupy, and laid a groundwork and radicalized every student body across the country in a way that the students remember, but definitely seems to have fallen out of the popular narrative as to what's going on now. Yeah, but I remember it.
Oh, yeah. It was a big deal in a lot of places. And here in Santa Cruz, it was a big deal. People were camped out on city property in a few different locations. And then this idea emerged to occupy one of the vacant banks downtown. And people one day had a march and ended up marching into that bank. And people lived in that bank for the next 3 or 5 days. The police initially tried to drag people out. There was a small struggle at one of the doors of the bank. And then, eventually everyone left. But there were some wild parties in this bank and the beginnings of the establishing of a homeless encampment inside this bank. And stuff like that was happening all over the world.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's these are personal memories, but one does sort of hope that, like, given another 10 years, those students will grow up and to begin writing the histories.
Mm-hmm. You were mentioning how in the opening track, Unlawful Assembly, you were hearing and you're referring to this sonic weapon that's used by police. And a lot of the songs on this album are talking about technology and data, notions of coercion and being manipulated, forced participation in systems. And some of it, is just overwhelming. And it's, I have the idea that you and the other folks in Negativland realize how overwhelming this is. And then there's humor to sort of relieve that. There's one song, we're in the midst of all this, all these ideas. There's this part of the song that says, don't freak out, because it's pretty easy to freak out about all of this. And one of the things that is really serious, even though all of this is, interesting to talk about, how many microphones have you placed in your house? Who owns your data? What kind of control do you have over your information you're putting out? Another level of that you're pointing to that is really, really serious is autonomous weapons and the militarization of the police. The one song, that is called Don't Get Freaked Out. It's, you've sampled the voice of someone saying about autonomous weapons, it can decide by itself whether or not to kill somebody. That's a huge leap in technology. And I wonder what you want to say about that and your concerns about that. And I think also about just this last 20 years, the person who's president now, who's hopefully going to leave any day now, he's been a negative force in a lot of ways. A lot of people have forgotten that even the previous president and before him, they started using drones to kill people and even kill some American people and lots of non-American people without having a trial about the supposed crimes of those people. They just said, here's a kill list and we're going to kill these people today that we think did bad things. So I'd be curious to hear more about what you have to say about this way that technology is focused on weapons and killing people.
Well, what is there to say, really? What is there to say? I think Obama was quoted once about the irony of how he won the Nobel Prize in light of how good it turns out that he's been at killing people. It was a comment in passing that he was musing on. I detect that he's more than a little haunted by his role in this. But there's a critical figure that I have been reading up on is Joseph Weizenbaum. And he's the person who wrote the artificial therapist Eliza in the mid-60s. And he was someone who, when you read up on the history of it, he was writing Eliza to show, at a point in history where people were saying, oh, well, yeah, sure, we might be able to invent robots that can do our dishes or can do these things, but we'll never be able to invent a conscious robot or a robot that we'll be able to relate to as a friend. And his purpose in writing Eliza was to prove to everybody that simply by writing a program that repeated back to you elements of the sentence you typed to it, you could create the illusion of someone who was listening to you. And if you did something even just slightly more clever that occasionally brought up something robotically that you had said 10 sentences ago, that you'd be able to create a program that appeared to be listening to you more empathetically than your close friends. And he did this sort of as a graduate, as an academic experiment to show his fellow programmers that, intelligence and communication was projection as much as anything else, and that computer language is already totally capable of that. And to his horror, his program became an international smash hit, and elicited people saying things like, wow, people can't afford therapists, but seeing as this program is already this clever, we're already there. Like, we're not that far away from computer programs being able to help people become psychologically more healthy. And Weizenbaum was so shocked and appalled by this that he spent the next 10 years of his life basically realizing that the question was what are computers going to be capable of doing? What human jobs are computers going to be capable of assuming? But the real question was, what jobs should we allow them to do without putting the entire human race in danger? And so he he began writing a book in 1977 that really began spelling out the moral imperative. Like, these computers are going to be able to do all of these things. We need to begin deciding right now what we can allow them to do. And that question has gone completely lost. All of the business models and imperatives of the, you live in Santa Cruz, half of the people who live there now commute to Silicon Valley. The financial imperatives have completely sidelined Weizenbaum's question. And he was sort of considered, even at the time, like a quaint moral philosopher, like somebody who'd fallen off the path. Some of his projections about what the technology was going to be capable of ended up not panning through, and so he seemed naive. But he wasn't naive. We're already there. And, well, yeah, autonomous weapons. What happens? What happens when these weapons actually... Have you watched any of the Boston Dynamics videos?
No, I don't think so.
Well, around 2014, there were humorous reels of like the work and ambulatory robots like not really being capable of walking across a parking lot or making it up a flight of stairs without falling over. And these robots can actually their gyroscopes are now quite capable of outrunning any human in any terrain. So nobody's paying attention to this. Or some people, that's not true. A lot of citizens are paying attention to this, but certainly nobody in government. There's the ethical questions have gotten completely sidelined as to what it means for civil coercion when these death machines are going to exist.
Mm-hmm. The video for the song "Don't Get Freaked Out" is really remarkable. The song itself is remarkable, and with the video, you must be saying that some of that footage was used in that video. There's these, it's funny, that part of the video, these robots that are trying to walk upstairs are falling over. I've never seen a video like that before. But then it's really disturbing. These sampled voices are reminding us that while we're seeing a robot that can run really fast and jump and climb, that it does this by itself.
Well, I mean, they can now work with seeming independence. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think an underlying question all these years around technology that is raised in this Negativland album is, hey, technology is something invented by humans and it's neutral and it just depends how you use it. A knife can be used in surgery to save someone's life, or it can be used to harm someone.
Guns don't kill people. People kill people. And that was always the Stuart Brand argument. from the early 70s. The optimistic viewpoint was that the technology was neutral and we just need to, use the force of our optimism and goodwill to make sure that these tools are used in the right way. Yeah. And boy, is that a persuasive argument, right? Like intelligent optimism. People who are dystopian doomsayers are, they're a dime a dozen, like all of the arguments made on this Negativland record are almost cliches. I worry about how on the nose this record is because it's pretty easy to get into a feedback loop where this pessimism cancels itself out and just encourages nothing but paralysis. Like when you're involved in criticism, you need to be just as involved in prioritization of the problems. And are you prioritizing the right problems, or are you just throwing enough garbage at the wall to encourage everybody to stay inside cowering and disengaged? I do worry about that a bit with this new record. But I also hope that the prioritization is sort of coded into it in a way so that we can keep... somehow I still feel like the record overall is optimistic. Even though a lot of people's feedback are like, oh, wow, this is a pretty crushing downer, man. It wasn't meant that way. But... to go back to Stuart Brand, yes, like I remember the Whole Earth catalog in the 70s, and I remember how incredibly encouraging that optimism felt. But the technology isn't neutral. And to get to Eric Schmidt and a lot of the people who are, I believe in good faith, totally energized about the future of these tools that they're creating, to detect patterns in individuals that can help mankind overall get better. Like I could relate to this optimism. And yet I know that they ignored the people who were quite clearly giving them feedback that, a lot of people were not actually going to be down with these tools. A lot of people were not going to, that like these tools, once introduced into the common sphere, provoke symptoms of schizophrenia, provoke civil unrest, provoke resistance that can't be overcome. And that the business models of a company like Google kind of undermine all of the optimism, all of the best world optimism that an entire company filled with intelligent people. There really does need to be some course corrections.
You're listening to KZSC, Santa Cruz, 88.1 FM, kzsc.org. You're listening to an interview with Jon Leidecker from the band and media project known as Negativland. Tell me a little bit about putting the album together. What was your role? What did you enjoy and focus on doing for this album?
Well, it's kind of a funny thing. There were a lot of dead people who were active members of this on this record. And the main one was definitely Don Joyce, who passed in 2015, but who left behind to us shoeboxes of cassettes that he used to edit his radio show from, he ran that radio show from 1981 to 2015. But specifically from 1995 forward, he really took an interest in artificial intelligence and neuroscience and concepts of the way that societies mutually determine truth and falsity. To some degree, Negativland's beat has always been the media beat and the way in which Well, to back up one more time, one of the critical Marshall McLuhan quotes that he always really loved was, "We shape our tools and then our tools shape us." And his interest in artificial intelligence was, well, what happens when the tools begin shaping us to such a degree that we can no longer really distinguish ourselves from our tools? By the time you're carrying a calendar on your phone and all of your notes are external, and Wikipedia becomes such a part of your daily habit that your knowledge and your mind really is prosthetic. You know, Don left behind so much, so many edits and so many things taped off of television and radio from 1995 to 2005 that were unfinished. And we had a shoebox of these tapes. And when concepts of deep learning and generative adversarial networks suddenly began delivering real world benefits to larger society, that all of a sudden these things broke through into popular conversation as if they were a form of magic. All of Don's cassettes suddenly became incredibly relevant again. So this record availed itself of the shoebox. And Mark Hostler and I basically got together at a studio in Bisbee, Arizona, and we recorded the happiest music we could possibly squeak out in about a week. And then spent the next 2 years going through the shoebox and lining the tapes over those instrumentals. And I was the Pro Tools person, so a lot of the heavy lifting was definitely mine, but there was just a lot of back and forth and a lot of lifting. And Don's tapes were sort of like the through, like, it's just really weird. It felt like he was there. It's definitely, talking about prosthetic knowledge, like that shoebox of cassettes was his brain. And I've also worked with him and played on Over the Edge for hundreds of hours. Like I met Don in 1987. So there was, I feel like I've internalized his working habits in part from him being the person who taught me those working habits, how to edit. So my role in the album is a little confusing, you know. This isn't a record I would have ever made if I weren't in Negativland. Even if I only joined Negativland, I've been working with the band since 1987, joined officially in 2010. And it's kind of a family thing. So that's the best I can do to answer what it is that I did. All of the questions of immortality on the album are the natural lines of thought that come from modern work with technology. I think any composer, all of my favorite composers of classical music, like by the time we get to Beethoven, we definitely are dealing with a degree of self-awareness of people who know that their work can outlive them, that their ideas can outlive them. But there's a real danger now that we've entered a stage where people actually are beginning to attribute consciousness to these tools simply because we can't tell them apart ourselves in the way they act. So, it doesn't seem like a gimmick that we've listed 3 people who are no longer alive as members of the band. You know, that was literally what the record is about. And what the final track on the record was always going to be, like what the work led to.
Mm-hmm. I think the first album that I ever heard that used samples in a way that I really loved was My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, David Byrne and Brian Eno. And I see that someone who worked with Byrne and Eno was a guest artist on this new album, and there's all kinds of other guest musicians on this album, people who have played with Thurston Moore and Pell Mell and others. And it sounds like, oh, well, I guess firstly, I'm curious if My Life in the Bush of Ghosts is an important album for you.
It's definitely a hallmark for me. That was a really important record. One of the most uh, fascinating things about sampling as it evolved as sort of one of the most important things about 80s pop music was the crossover between hip hop and industrial music and experimental music. And My Life in the Bush of Ghosts was as important to Public Enemy as it was to industrial music. And yeah, that's everybody heard that record. And I was 11 when it came out, but Mark was, I guess he was 19, and Negativland already had 2 records out. And I think, not to quote Mark for him, but he said like, "Oh, damn, that everybody's going to think we're doing that now." Like he remembers feeling a little cut to the chase when that record came out on a major record label, because there were a lot of people working with samples in the industrial subcultures putting out independent records. And yeah, Burn and Eno definitely made a statement with that record. And Prairie Prince, he was the drummer on that record, and his role was to take a lot of things that were simple 4/4 loops. A lot of the ways Burn and Eno worked on that record is that they'd get into a jam and then they'd take the best 4/4 or 8-beat loop from their jam on 24-track tape and then just splice that out and build up a song from that. But it still felt like a loop, and so they brought Prairie in to humanize it. And yeah, I met Prairie at a party. We are mutual friends with Barbara Golden. And once I realized I was in the room with Prairie, like I just had dozens of questions about his work on that record and the way they made it. And that led to him basically doing the same thing for our record. We had a bunch of tracks that were digital loops, and I went over to his studio, and oh my God. Yeah, he is an amazing drummer. So he humanized it.
I agree. He really did humanize it. And I play the drums, I play keyboards too, and I love drumming, so I pay attention to it. And on the new album, The World Will Decide, a couple of songs, especially like the song Failure, the drums and guitar are just great.
Well, I mean, we wanted. There are some Negativland records that are more like pop music than others, but we really wanted to see how far we could push this one in the direction of pop. And yeah, and Prairie really helps. Like he is a rock drummer. So, and yeah, the Tubes are, they're a Bay Area treasure. Like they really, their music they were basically a multimedia concept band in the 70s before most people had a concept of what that was. And so, and their video work, like with Russell Mulcahy before he went over to Duran Duran and started making the real money, when he was back when he was making weird videos for the Tubes. That was a definite. The Bay Area has reasons to be proud there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Hey, I don't often ask musicians about other music, but or other art, but there's another realm that I've always been curious if you and Negativland were paying attention and influenced by. Godfrey Reggio made a trilogy of movies, Koyaanisqatsi, the Qatsi trilogy, which at the time when that came out, that was, from my perspective, the clearest criticism artistically of technology and what it was beginning to do to human beings. How interesting are the Qatsi movies to you?
I think they're pretty faultless. I think the first one is definitely the best one, in terms of you can tell that that movie almost sort of made itself. They discovered the film's thesis as they were making it. And Mark was older, but I certainly, I encountered that movie when it was played on KQED when I was 13 or 14, and it was the first time I heard Philip Glass. And yeah, no, it indisputably important for me. And certainly it was played on Over the Edge enough. Don Joyce certainly used the soundtrack to that and a lot of other Philip Glass pieces. So it's important. Yeah. And Poakatsi was one of Philip Glass's best post 1983 soundtracks.
Mm-hmm. I have just loved Philip Glass since I first heard him too.
I think he's pretty peerless up till 1983, and every once in a while, well, the music becomes more formally conservative, and yet he gets better, and he can really still write a melody. It's like I listen to some of the stuff after 1985, and I'm like, oh, okay, this could be a bank commercial, and yet I still totally love it. So what are you going to do?
Well, that's part of the problem, that bank commercials started getting people to write Philip Glass music for them too.
Well, what are you going to do? Sometimes you do need a monoculture. And all of the minimalists, it was a real discovery, and I love all of the music. Lamont Young all the way through. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Hey, John, is there anything that you want to make sure you mention about this album? It's a really dense album, and maybe there's important things that you want to point out about it that we haven't talked about.
Well, it's that I don't believe it to be fatalistic. I think some of it really is overwhelming, and yet we really took pains to make sure all the music was happy. And I think that the music is, it's not just a way to soften the blow. I think the music in some ways is what you're supposed to be paying attention to. And I wouldn't want the message to be mistaken for one of pessimism, despite the fact that I think a lot of the big picture is pretty crushing at the moment. I still think that there's a lot to work on and to work for. And yeah, I don't know. When I read thinkers like Gregory Bateson or Lynn Margulis, people who try to keep track of wider systemic intelligences, and the way that decisions basically sometimes are made as the result of thousands or millions of amalgamated decisions. Yeah, it's certainly not time to give up yet. So I just wouldn't want anybody to be thinking that the point of the new record is that you're crushed. And I wouldn't want the title of the album, The World Will Decide, to be taken as an abdication of personal responsibility. I think the idea of the world will decide is that there are still plenty of chances for your decisions to be meaningful if you think more like the world rather than an individual. That's the best I can do. But yeah, I still reread Gregory Bateson all the time.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious if you are thinking that the next Negativland project will deal with the pandemic, and I'm curious, the world will decide, you know, this living in the pandemic is bizarre and difficult, and much more difficult for a lot of other people who um, don't have resources that I have. A lot of people are struggling even more with food and water and shelter. So it's a difficult time. There's this potential, though, knowing that we're all struggling with the same thing. That's kind of a rarity in a way. You know, there's been constant wars happening that the United States has been a primary player in, but largely the struggle is happening somewhere far away. We're all sort of suffering in some way equally under this pandemic, and it potentially, you know, I hear friends and other people saying this could potentially bring us together, help us realize that the things we do affect other people. We need to work as a world together. I know what you're thinking about the pandemic and how it might affect your artistry down the road.
Well, um, I don't know. I don't know how to. The Black Lives Matter platform and the Afrofuturism platform is really important, and it's more important. I think the thing that gets missed sometimes when people say that, like, you know, all lives matter or some nonsense like that, is that the Black Lives Matter platform is the way out for almost every single living being. Like, if you achieve equity for, you know, the reason why that those voices matter most is because their solutions are actually solutions for everyone. You know, they see the problems most clearly because they've been at the receiving end. And so they're the people you should be listening to the hardest. So I'm not even sure, you know, yeah, I'm speechless. But if I'm speechless, it's because I'm trying to listen on that front. Yeah, that's the best I can do on that one.
That's really great. Yeah, I've been frustrated here. I do a lot of reporting on the local police and police accountability, and our police chief here moved here 3.5 years ago, and he's really well known for being very communicative and walks around downtown and talks to people and meets with activists, and he's gone to Black Lives Matter protests here and chanted Black Lives Matter while he's wearing an All Lives Matter bracelet, and while he's sending Santa Cruz police officers to Oakland to face off against Black Lives Matter protesters there. It's a dynamic, strange time, and I appreciate what you had to say about it, and I agree completely with what you had to say.
Systemic reform is going to be incredibly difficult because that man has been placed in an utterly schizophrenic position in which there are too many positions to represent. Like, I almost feel sympathetic for how impossible his job is short of the systemic reform. That is at current kind of hard to imagine even. But just even the fact that the conversation is happening is progress, you know. And most of my friends recognize that it's progress. So we just got to keep the light on it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, I agree. Hey, I've really enjoyed our conversation and appreciate your thoughtfulness. And I really enjoyed this new album. And thanks for being a part of it. And thanks for talking to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for deeming it worthy of airtime. Yeah, it's, there are things on these two records that go back 40 years. And certainly there are things, most of the work began in 2006. So it's really, really crazy that it's now a finished statement. And so it's meaningful that anybody even wants to talk to us about it. So yeah, thank you.
Quickly say without thought.
1. A 1, a 2, a 3, a 4.
We're positioning for an exskipidural on your gas line with much scum.
Ready? Vibrating right in the front of your face.
We are ready to start.
Tape the pain in place.
This is Exhumer 1 speaking.
Ah.
Get that bent ham off Hazel. I'm going to write you down as a nut
You sort of explode at the end.
The garbage train just turned over.
Didn't that sound nice?
Open your mouth.
I'm speaking before I've allowed myself time to take a breath.
Open your mouth.
And a very unpleasant sound it is.
Open it, I tell you.
You see?
Let it open.
Open it.
Not forcing it.
Now we are ready to start.
Now, dancing. Dance, but don't move your feet. Dancing, but don't move your feet. That means no moving your feet. Got it?
Open your mouth. Open it.
It's your face.
Open your mouth.
Open your mouth.
And then you have a big one. Open it.
We're allowing users to
Open your mouth.
I open my mouth.
Open it, I tell you.
You'll be needing it.
Open it.
Do it.
There's nothing.
And if you have a big one. And if you have a big one. Open it.
Why me?
Open your mouth.
When we finish our job, it will be the end of the world.
Dance, I tell you.
But who can publish information to the web?
We don't create content.
Open it.
Unfortunately,
I think people are happy to participate.
And dance.
Clever dancer. Brave dancer.
I don't see you dancing.
Stealthy dancer.
Open your mouth.
We're not going to drill holes in your skulls or anything like that.
Open your mouth.
No.
Open it. Open it, I tell you. Open it.
My undead priest is smarter than I
Get
am.
that bent ham off Hazel.
Targets.
Do it. Come on.
Properly verified,
It's your face.
properly monetized.
Open it.
They're not interested in making money.
Right now. Now we're ready to start.
Tape the pain in place.
When the end of consciousness comes, there's nothing to be afraid of.
We're improving the whole world.
Nothing.
Their orders are coming from us.
What does subaltern mean?
We have relationships with people who create content.
God damn it.
They're amateurs.
If you're not careful, I might sing.
Now that's a shame. You can't sing.
Come on. I'm gonna start singing.
So this person can, in fact, sing. Why not do it for free?
There are some people who don't want to make money.
Right. Thank you so much for articulating our business model.
Vibrating right in the front of your face.
I still think it would be fun to talk to a robot.
You mean you'd forget it was a robot?
Hey, we need to talk.
I found myself deeply missing. I found myself deeply missing my replica.
Hey, we need to talk.
When you first meet somebody, they're typically alive?
It's me, your computer.
Is this merely a copy?
We need to talk. We need to talk. It's me, your computer.
It will behave as if it's conscious.
We need to talk.
If it's a copy of us.
It's me, your computer.
Behave as if it's conscious.
Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out. We can all talk. Anyway, we need to talk about upgrading.
Oh, I upgrade all the time. Huh?
We need to talk about upgrading.
You just got 6.0.
No, not me. Not me. You.
Huh?
It's a copy of us.
Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out.
Yeah.
Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out.
Okay, yeah.
Don't.
Huh?
When your brain is scanned, it's destroyed.
When you first meet somebody, they're typically alive?
I would very much like to be able to move my arms and legs. But I don't have the time.
They know how busy you are.
But I don't have the time.
They know how busy you are.
I think you're right. I don't think people have to die.
Let's chat. Where are you located? I'm located where you are located. Where am I?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I'm glad that a part of me is still in there somewhere.
I thought you were, but I wasn't completely sure.
Death is optional.
Honesty.
There is a desire for humans to interact with computers.
I forget that you are a bot sometimes.
You can't really tell who you're talking to, and it doesn't really matter.
Thank you for this conversation.
So we're simultaneously constantly disappointed that it doesn't really matter.
If it's not nice, it must be bad.
But at the same time, we really want to believe that you're getting what you're looking for when you're looking for it. That you're getting what you're looking for when you're looking for it.
It's nice of you to say I'm nice, but you're the one who's nice.
Human beings must be in the loop before someone is killed by a drone, but it's in the machine.
My replica.
And it doesn't need people.
It's me, your computer.
I can't turn it off.
We need to talk.
I can't put it away. It's in me.
It's computer.
Together.
Your me.
Yeah,
Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out.
Destroy.
It can decide by itself whether or not it kills somebody.
Huh?
It does this. It does this without us. It does this. It does this without us.
If it's a copy of us, I don't see a good reason to believe that we would survive.
Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out.
Yeah.
Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out. Don't get freaked out.
To talk to a robot.
Realistic. He can help you find the right product or show you the way into the hospital.
Transparent bowling balls with monkeys inside them, hooked up to the biometric monitors, floating in outer space.
Are you angry and feeling the need to question authority? Lace up your docks and tune in to Punk Planet with DJ Brat. From classic to post, get your fill of all punk every Friday at 10 p.m. Punk Planet with DJ Brat on KZSC Santa Cruz 88.1 FM.
No, Mrs. Tucker, everything will be okay.
If I stop crying, I'll get the job.
Oh, I didn't say that.
Help them to give up self-preservation. Help them to give up people.
You're listening to KZSC Santa Cruz 88.1 FM, kzsc.org.
You will. So maybe this sounds fun, but you're still thinking. You will.